Hello, everyone. I'm Robyn Grable, the founder of Talents Ascend and the Ascend Collective, and your host for Ascending Beyond Barriers. Welcome. Ascending Beyond Barriers is an inspiring podcast dedicated to showcasing the remarkable journeys of small business founders who have faced and overcome significant challenges on their path to success. Each episode delves into the personal stories of entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds, highlighting their unique experiences, struggles, and triumphs. Welcome back to the Ascending Beyond Barriers podcast, where we lift voices, share stories, and celebrate the incredible journeys of veterans, military spouses, and change makers who are breaking barriers every day. Before we dive in, though, please subscribe so we can share more of these stories. You don't miss an episode. We have a huge thank you to those who share our mission and support our mission of elevating talent, building communities, and thriving people out there. So today's guest is Alex McFarland. So excited to talk with Alex. We're kind of in the same industry, so love to hear those stories, love to share his stories, and you're in for an incredible conversation. So let's dive in. Alex, thanks so much for being here. Thank you for wearing the uniform of the United States Air Force. I always like to start with people's military journeys. So let's start there. What took you to the Air Force, and tell us about your experience.
Well, first, thank you for having me on, Robyn. I really appreciate what you're up to, and I think you have a tremendous mission. And I think it's really cool to be at a place where I feel like comfortable having a conversation like this in this context. So thank you. I was one of those kids, just troubled youth, that was directed by their elders into a path that would probably be more effective or successful for them than going to college. So I joined the Air Force as right out of high school, and as a airborne Korean linguist. So went to school for a long time, and then that took me from California, the Presidio of Monterey, down to West Texas, then up for intel training, and then up to Washington for survival school and some other stuff there, and then back to Omaha, Nebraska, where I was born and raised, where I was stationed on Offutt Air Force Base, coming out of training. So that's a high level kind of run of my enlistment, and I am shamelessly a one and done. I knew from when I signed the paperwork that I was going to be 4 years and out. So it worked out really well for me.
Well, that's not shameless. That's definitely you. Hey, you wore the uniform, you raised your right hand. A linguist, though, that sounds quite complicated for somebody who you kind of alluded to having a troubled youth, but being a linguist is not easy. Like, why did you choose that?
I don't know that I made the choice, Robyn. I think that there was absolutely moments in the first weeks when I realized what I'd done, specifically getting off the plane after basic training and then thinking, okay, now I get to be a human being again. And they're like, no, this is just basically basic training light until you're done with training, which for me was going to be 2.5 years, let's say. So, that's how it would end up being. It was about 3 years. But it was an interesting choice, but I'm really grateful that it worked out the way that it did. I had to learn a lot about myself to be successful in that environment. And I think it set me up for the life that I've got after the military. And so regardless of kind of whatever story I tell about how I got into it, I'm grateful for how it turned out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the same way. I mean, I chose the Navy because the recruiter came to our high school one day, and I felt like I had no other choices at that point in my life for various reasons. Recruiter came to the high school and said, "Hey, join the Navy and see the world." I'm like, yes, I'm in. So yeah, it kind of worked out, but I did 9 years. So I didn't have a plan going into it. You sound like you had a definite plan, which is interesting too, because if you kind of knew that you were going to be 4 years and that was it, which some pre-planning there is pretty good insight, but spending 3 of that 4 years in training, It shows kind of the investment that the military makes in our, our service members, which a lot of civilian companies take for granted and don't really understand. So wow, a lot of time there. All right, so you did your 4 years, got out. How did you transition then, and then how did you start the company and Persevus? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So, at a really high level, I joined the Air Force like you. I wanted to see the world. I thought, okay, airborne, they're going to station me in Japan. I'm going to fly over Korea. It'll be great stories. And then I'll go on with, the rest of my life. And I wanted to get into international business. So it all made sense to me. It made less and less sense for the military's perspective to continue investing in me and for me to keep going. But I think at a certain point, it was like, well, I'm not a quitter. And so it's just like, I'm going to make it to the end of this thing. As far as coming out of the military, I joined the Air Force to see the world, and I got stationed 20 minutes from home. So I didn't really feel like I got that. So I came out with just all this, like, I want to travel energy, all this, like, I want to go and see the world. I didn't get deployed. I didn't get even like a TDY somewhere that wasn't a training school. So it was all just basically preparation and then waiting till my enlistment was up. And then I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? So I ended up studying in Norway for a little while, and capitalized on that, realized that I wanted to, have an international life while I was there. I was like, this is, I think, for me. So we meaning like my community of people, started to conspire, like, okay, well, where can I go to school that has lots of nature and stuff? And ended up at CU Boulder, down the road from where I'm at right now in Denver, and studying philosophy. Again, just kind of like an accidental thing. My dad went to a talk by a successful entrepreneur who said that future entrepreneurs should study philosophy so they learn how to think. Everything else they're going to have to get trained on, or train themselves on. And I thought, you know what, that sounds about right. Got into it. I had like a year. By the way, Robyn, all this time in training, one of the great things about the military is you get all these college credits, right? So I was 3 semesters away from graduation when I enrolled at CU, and I spent 4 years there. So I fell in love with philosophy. I fell in love with Boulder. I fell in love with just like the kind of college environment. And it was perfect because it was 4 years of Boulder, 4 years of kind of getting spun up in the Air Force, and then getting kind of unwound in Colorado. So, but when I got to the end, Robyn, I got to the end of this time period, I was like, man, I either go to graduate school or I need to start my life. And I didn't have, as people joke, like, you go to, what is a philosophy major going to do, right? Like, the only options are basically teach or be a barista. So I left, and I said, okay, I don't want to be an insurance agent. I ended up working with a professor of mine to start up a social enterprise in Cameroon, Africa. So I spent there 6 months there, teaching English to like 6, 7, 8-year-olds, learning just how hard teaching is, by the way. Like, I had tremendous respect for walking in their shoes for such a short period, but it's a real vocation. But 6 months in, I realized like this project that I was working on wasn't going to work. And while I was there, my uncle reached out to me, and he asked me this question. He goes, Alex, how much are you making to teach in Cameroon? I said, like $120 a month. And he's like, all right, if you're stupid enough to work for $120 a month, I think I might have a job for you. So we ended up starting a logistics contracting firm, which has since grown to be one of the premier providers of naval support services in the Western Hemisphere. But did that for 2.5 years, and then realized at the end that it wasn't really the lifestyle that I wanted. It wasn't my calling. And I had a really, to your point, early on, had a sense of a path, and realized that wasn't quite it. And I realized it, I think, on a plane on the way down to Panama City, Panama. And I was riding with some Navy officers, and they told me about what was coming the coming year, and I just knew what was going on with the business. And this isn't for me. So while I was down in Panama, the second trip for that particular mission, I realized, like, okay, I need a name. I have no business plan. I need to go. I can't work. I can't have a job. At this point, I've had 3 years of kind of feeding myself and experiencing the rush of being an entrepreneur. And it's like, all right, well, I know how to do government contracting. I know how to make things happen in all over the world. I've done missions in Africa and South America, Eastern Europe. And it's like, all right, I can do something. So hence, turning to the community again was perseverance. I asked, like, okay, well, what's it going to take? I don't have a business plan. They're like, well, you better, if you don't have a plan, then you better be prepared for a big ride. And so I was like, all right, well, then I've always been interested in psychology. So I was like, okay, how can I hack myself so I don't quit? Right. I kind of knew from language school that I could do things, but like, boy, there was no finish line for this. Like, it was no like, okay, I just got to do it for 2 years. Right. So I named the company the first .com that I could find that would remind me of perseverance. And that's how we ended up with Persevus. So, it was basically a GoDaddy search and just different iterations of perseverance until I found Persevus, and then it was off to the races from there. So, the very big contrast from 8 years prior, where I had a very clear idea of where I was going next. In this case, it was kind of like jumping off a cliff and hoping the water's deep.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the journey of entrepreneurship, right? I mean, you have an idea, you've got something you want to do, and you just take the leap. You just take that jump and go into it. So I will tell you, I looked up, I had ChatGPT tell me what Persevus meant. I'm like, does it have a meaning? Because I love different words and different, things. And I love being in the Navy, all the acronyms, all the military acronyms, right? You're always looking for the meaning of words. So, and it came up and said perseverance was the closest it could come up with to what Persevus meant. So congratulations. Well, so you're in your bio, it says you're helping core economy, small to medium sized businesses. What does that mean?
So when I think about core economy, I think about the kinds of services and products that no matter what happens with technology or with like our culture, they're universal. For example, people need houses. So there's always going to be people that are building houses. We need common areas. So there's always going to be contractors that are making institutions, that are making our community centers. So there's always going to be, so those are examples of kind of like service providers or firms that, whether or not we're in the 21st century or the 18th century, those companies exist, right? So, and then also just like from a background perspective, Robyn, that was all I was familiar with, right? I didn't go to, I'm not from one of the coasts. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. I've got, it's very conservative. It's very kind of what's proven. Let's not, deviate too far outside of the norm. So I'm very comfortable working in that environment while also bringing my own kind of flavor. So right now we serve general contractors, specialty subcontractors, and manufacturing companies that are kind of fed up with trying to figure out how to hire post-COVID.
Yeah, tell us more about your mission. What do you do?
Well, I think we got to figure out the mission, but I'll tell you that at the core of our business is this belief in human first business. So the idea that our first priority needs to be the people, and then as a second order consequence of our prioritization of the people, we're going to have a successful business. That was something that came to me in the frustrations of recruiting post-COVID, where before COVID, the question was, how do we find the right people? And post-COVID, it was, how do we get anybody to join our team, right? So it just massively shifted, and I think it flipped over the chessboard, and we're still trying to sort out the pieces on that. But one of the things that I figured out was like, wow, my clients are super focused on what their business needs, and they're really not paying attention at all to what these candidates need. So in the process of figuring out how to recruit successfully in this new environment, I found that, turning back to my philosophy training was like, okay, let's think about what are the core principles. And one of them is, let's focus on the human experience of recruiting. And and go from there. So I'd say that that's like a core belief of ours, and it's a core belief that we share with our clients. I think a lot of companies out there that are, especially in that kind of small to mid-sized space, their number one driver is not making money. They'd have different businesses if it was. They're money motivated, but they want to have community impact. They want to have legacy. They want to be able to, at the end of the night, sleep, without, too much help. So we work really well with people that share that belief.
Nice. Yeah. Well, we're one of those people because we're all about skills first. Looking at the human being, not where they've been, not what their previous employer was, not how they learned the skills, but the skills that they have. So, and looking at the human, whether it's veterans, whether it's military spouses, diversely able, justice impacted, we're really about that community and making sure businesses see the humans, especially for small businesses. Like you said, they have to be agile and adaptable, and they need people that can be that way too. They don't need a button a seat. I mean, it's so different in that environment. So awesome. Well, what would you say has been the biggest barrier, the biggest challenge that you've had to overcome as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think it's become a superpower, but the transition from personality driven business to systems driven business has been huge, right? So when we were coming out of COVID, we were starting to have a lot of success, and I hired recruiter, and we ended up having this little motley crew of recruiters, but revenue didn't go up linearly with the additions of additional people. But you know what did? Complexity. Every new person, it got more complicated. Every project seemed to be more stressful. And I thought, gosh, there's got to be a way to do this that doesn't look like this. I happened upon this book called The E-Myth. Michael Gerber, I think, is a genius. You're familiar with it. Just a great book, great idea. And it struck for me as I said, you know what? I bet that I can come up with a way to deliver engaged candidates that accept offers the way that McDonald's delivers cheeseburgers. So that kind of predictable way to do that. And then I had to go figure out how to do it. It turned out that was like any significant change. It was a process of transformation and just repeating transformation. There was, okay, we'll go, into this and solve one problem. And now we've created a new problem that we weren't expecting. Okay, we got to go in. And so much of that process was burning off dead branches of my personality, of my belief system, of how I was showing up in the world. And so in order for the business to transform, I had to transform. And I'm very grateful for that process, but it all started with basically a commitment in 2021 that if I couldn't figure out how to make providing candidates like McDonald's did with cheeseburgers, I'm going to go down trying. Persevus can die on that hill, but we're burning the boats. We're going in that direction. And 5 years later, I'd say we've been massively successful with that project, both personally and in terms of our little McDonald's franchise is really quite extraordinary. So nice. Yeah, that'd be how I'd respond to that, Robyn.
So speaking of transformations and being a veteran, what do you think, and barriers, what do you think are the biggest challenges or barriers that service members face transitioning out of the service?
For sure. I got two, right? I have strong beliefs about this. The first one is to go from a socialist organization to a capitalist organization. In the military, you're taken care of. All you have to worry about is doing your job, right? If you can do your job well, you're going to be able to do 20 years. And I mean, of course, there's edge cases that people get hurt and all that. But yeah, I mean, it's a different kind of society. And it typically comes in a formative period in somebody's life. So they're strongly adapted to this world. And then they go out into the civilian world, and it's so much different. There isn't anybody else looking out for you. There isn't clear expectations. Your managers don't have manuals. You don't have manuals. It's all kind of up for grabs. So I think that accepting that transition, that, okay, this is what I'm dealing with, and embracing that it's possible to make the personal transformation to thrive in that latter environment is core. The second thing is, and this is something that it doesn't just apply to veterans, but it applies to everybody, is you got to understand how people are creating value. What is value? How is it created? How can I contribute to that? And then once you figure that out, then you can find ways to apply your skills to create value for others. And then the trick is to learn how to negotiate so you can get a little piece of that new value pie that you've created. And that's, at the end of the day, that to me, those are the kind of the two major components to thriving coming out of transition.
Yeah. And you work with government contractors, which are usually pretty big on hiring veterans. What would you tell other companies who aren't government contractors, but the value of a veteran and the skills that they bring, and what would you tell businesses to why you should hire a veteran?
Well, I had our business prior to direct placement recruiting was staffing veterans on technology integration projects around the country. And then most of those were in hospitals. So in 2021 or whatever that was, that when COVID hit, COVID 2020, all the hospitals shut down to non-essential employees. Well, my folks were non-essential. So we went from having a really successful business to having no business overnight. But what it was my bet with veterans was that it takes a certain kind of character to do the work. And I think that the successful businesses now are under indexing on skill, on do you know how to run Excel versus, are you an organized person? Right? There's kind of a realization that's blossoming right now about, it's a lot easier to teach people how to do things than it is to teach them how to show up. And so I think the safe bet with veterans is, as long as they pass the smell test, they're probably somebody that's going to do what they say, or at least put in, their effort to do it. And that, frankly, in a knife fight of employment marketplace in the core economy, is a massive competitive advantage.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, people that want to be there, want to use their skills versus somebody that you've got to just pull along with you. People don't have time for that. Yeah.
No.
Okay. So you also have a podcast called the McFarland Method. Tell us about that.
Well, I think that the podcast is about human first business, and it's still kind of finding its legs, but I'm a big believer that people are looking around right now and going, this isn't quite right. What worked for me or what worked for my parents in the past isn't seem to work now. So what do we do? And I think it's because we're in this period of transformation, and not just as individuals, but we see all kinds of trend lines towards things are radically changing. For example, young people aren't drinking, or is it just an interesting kind of line on the, on that trend map? So the idea is to bring together people that are interested in that idea and have different perspectives, and then have them share it. So I'm a big believer that the laws of physics are universal. So if it works in one domain, if you can find some process or some approach or some way of doing things that works in one domain, it's probably applicable to all domains. And then it would be applicable to me in my business in recruiting, but it'd be just as applicable to somebody that's in a sales organization or a professional services provider, or really if it applies for a musician and how they write their music, and they've kind of figured out a way to tap into that, boy, that probably applies to anybody that's doing any kind of creative work. So that's kind of my hypothesis. We'll see where we're at in a couple hundred episodes, but I think right now it's pretty fun to just be showing up and exploring.
It is fun. I love doing this. I mean, I love sharing the stories of people that are out there and just hearing the different journeys that people have been on. I mean, I've had a pretty unique journey in my lifetime. So I love hearing other people's journeys and where life has led them and where they're going. So, well, congratulations on everything. And I heard someone, I was watching something yesterday. I don't remember what it was, but in the realm of people matter, it said we're all different, but we're all looking for the same thing, to have a life, to have a thriving, and fulfilling life. So I think people matter, and you can't run a business without people. I've always said that. I mean, you could be a solopreneur for the rest of your life, but if you truly want to grow your business, you need people. And taking care of people, that it matters. So, all right, as we close out, because we're about out of time, give us your best advice for someone out there who wants to be an entrepreneur, or someone who's out there maybe struggling, thinking, "What am I going to do, with my life?" What would your best advice be?
Um, Boy, I think that it's that's a great question, and I think also I just want to note, like, you clearly are not only passionate about people, but you do also great at kind of setting up space for them to be themselves. So thank you, Robyn. Um, I would say, boy, really take seriously the idea that the ordering force in the universe, the thing that kind of generates life and is the reason that we're all here, is cares about you and wants to see you flourish. And that if you just open yourself up to that idea, that untold resources are going to come to your aid, unbelievable opportunities are going to sneak up on you. But you've got to kind of jump off that cliff of belief. And it's not just belief in yourself, it's a belief about the nature of the world that we live in. So, yeah, that's probably it.
That's awesome. That was great. Oh, that was, yeah, that was inspiring. Thank you, Alex. Well, thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on all you're doing, and thanks for sharing your journey. We really appreciate the opportunity to tell others about Alex McFarland.
Thank you, Robyn. I appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Ascending Beyond Barriers, where every story reminds us that potential deserves a pathway. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, and I know you could, follow us, rate us, subscribe, do all the things so that we can share more of these great stories. Our heartfelt thanks to everyone who's listening, especially our subscribers, for believing in our mission and helping us shine a light on the people who deserve to be seen, heard, and supported. So we meet again. Keep lifting voices, keep sharing your stories, and keep ascending beyond barriers.